Hey, what is up, you guys? Hefs here, and it has been about 2 months since I last posted a video. This is because I've been working on this huge video. I started working on it because I wanted to enter a giant building competition hosted by a well-known building YouTuber, TrixieBlocks. So the first step of any huge building project is planning, which in this case, I started out my islands of just sand, with the idea that I would have 2 mountains there, and then 2 separate little islands, which would be rather large mountains. The first mountain on this giant island would have been curved in, and the other one would be on the opposing side, also curved in so that they face each other, and I could have a giant bridge going across, which I ended up keeping in the end. But with these 2 islands, I planned on having a volcano, which did not turn out the way I wanted it to. Instead, I wound up just doing 2 more islands and completely ditching the original idea of a volcano. Now, here you see me going through just trying to connect this up to make it rather curved and to make a much nicer mountain. You're probably wondering, why didn't I just do this in the fancy world map, where you can build giant mountains? And that is because I didn't think about it. It's as simple as that. I genuinely did not think about the concept of downloading the program and then building it from there. Instead, I just built it up right here using World Edit, leaving the project to be a bit smaller, but still rather large, as it's well over 50 chunks. Here you see me going around the island, just filling it up and making it larger, so that way the mountains actually have a place to sit. Then I raised the island up by quite a bit to create this space for mines. Now, when I started this project, I knew I wanted to have a giant cave system going through the bottom of the island to create a faster method of travel and a cooler method of travel, because just going atop the island, that's what normal people do. I want to go under the island. And here you see me going through the river, just trying to make a little general shape, and then filling it up with water, thinking, oh, good enough, but that was not the case, as I first had to go through and fix up the edges, basically smoothing them out so that it looks like water had already previously run through there, to create a bit more of a story for the actual build itself. Now, when I was going through just doing this at hyper speed, I had a lot of mess ups, as you could probably tell there. And after that, I got along to the rest of the islands, carefully going through and fixing up the edges. Now you're probably thinking, Heps, that river looks ugly as hell underneath in the bottom. And that is because I genuinely didn't notice it, but we'll go back to that later. For right now, we're going around the island and we're fixing it up. But you can tell I'm an amateur with the replay mod as far as pausing and unpausing goes for larger projects, as large chunks of this build were left paused and then unpaused accidentally, but nothing too big, as the end I started to get more of the hang of it. So this is like the biggest mess ups with that mountain and that giant, there's a couple of flat areas. Then here I created more of a base for the actual island. This was to just have more space around it for building and for little platforms, as I knew I wanted to have special little plateaus for a mining area, a couple different buildings, maybe a pond or 2. Now I did a pond at every single top of the mountain, but when I was actually planning this out, I had no idea that I was going to make those ponds. I just figured I'd put a couple houses on there and make it go to the top. Now I started a color palette going around the entirety of the mountain here. This was to create a more tropical feel, and when I was building these mountains, I took a bit of inspiration from Grass Mountains, where it has the stone and then the grass. Now this is part of normal mountains, except that they're pure stone, whereas this one is cracked stone, bricks, stone, and andesite. Now, I use these combinations a lot for my different builds, and this is because the blocks go well together, as they're gray gradients and they break each other up. Then going around the island again like such, I wound up continuing this kind of green, then a brownish mixtures of brown, then more mixtures of green, and then finally going to normal grass blocks. This was to break up different sections of the island and to show that certain parts were quite a bit nicer, and that they would have more foliage or less foliage based on the coloration. That as I continued filling it, you can see what parts would have more and what parts would have less, as the brown would indicate that it was drier and deader, and making more trees go. Here on this hillside, I decided that I wanted to create an area for more housing, but I never really got back to it up until the end of the video, so you have to wait a little bit to see that. Now here you just see me going around the mountains. Now this editing right here is truly terrible, but it's the best I could do when I was salvaging this replay clip, as it wouldn't really work, but I did what I could to just give you a general look around, but it's just the same pattern we've been doing for the rest of it. All the way grass blocks, and then filling in stone. Now here, you see me going around creating 3 different types of trees. Our first, our little small tree. Then our medium tree, which gets a lot of inspiration from a great oak, which was generally the plan when I was making this. Just filling in with the slabs to create more depth, and then finally, this last giant tree. Now this tree is probably the best one out of all of the jungle trees, as it displays what jungle trees actually do. They're trying to collect water with their leaves, which is what this one actually did. The rest of them were just kind of stolen from different areas, or wouldn't likely be seen in a jungle biome, but I figured it'd be alright, as long as they had the general concepts. Then I went around the island, spamming these little tiny trees. Now I assumed trees. Easy. No big problem, right? Right? No. Wrong. I was dead wrong, okay? Just don't assume these things. Okay? Because when you paste a tree, you think, oh, easy, alright, the tree will appear and nothing will be the problem. But no, because when you paste it, it creates air and it destroys your land, and then you have to rebuild the land and then rebuild the tree, and it was a whole ordeal everywhere. Now for reference, this entire clip is sped up about 12 times, plus the 8 times in the already replay mod. Now this makes it about 20 times the actual speed it took me, and I'm already going pretty slow in total. That means that it was taking me so long to place each of these trees and fix the landform, as you saw there, and little hidden bits, that it was the biggest pain in the world. So for those of you who are doing a project like this and are thinking to yourself, oh man, trees are going to be easy, don't. They're not easy. They're a pain. The biggest pain ever, alright? Make time for it, because I know I didn't. I tried to quickly spam them around, leading to quite a few mess ups. I made a mess up by not creating a lot of diversity within the tree types. You see, I stuck with mostly large trees at the end because I was way too lazy to actually go through and properly do it. That's the whole reason. Then here you just see me slapping them on the mountain. This was just to cover up the mountains, as they looked rather barren compared to the floor. Plus I figured at this point, the mountains would have something growing out of the sides of them, as this island has been formed over years and years. Well, years for the island formation. For me, it was 35 plus hours of building, so not too much. Then I got to work on some stones, some just giant rock formations that I wanted to cover the island. So quickly, I just ran around spamming those on different parts of the island, in between the trees, just laying around. Then in a little bit, we're going to throw some of them in the actual river. This is to break up all of the trees, all the greenery, as I wanted more variation in the color. Now, quick thing. Trixie Blocks originally came up with this idea for the waterfall. That man is a genius. Look at this. I never would have thought of this. Use barrier blocks to cover up the water, or lava, but in this case it's water, giving you the perfect waterfalls. This is the biggest brain thing since Big Brain became a big brain, okay? It blew my mind when I saw it, and I had to incorporate it, so all credit goes to him for that idea. Then here I was just reshaping the bottom of the river like I previously stated. Now I know that I didn't get to it, and honestly I could have done better, but by this point in the build, I was about 20-ish hours in and I was kinda done and wanted to get to work on the actual housing. So here you see me building pathways up from the bottom of the mountain to the top, because obviously this is a village where you're gonna have to get from point A to point B, and they aren't very fancy in their construction, and I didn't want something too crazy, or else they wouldn't be living on mountains the way that they are, which you'll see in a little bit later, that awesome tree house, which was all part of the thumbnail. Now this house was meant to be built on 2 layers, so that way you could go from the top of this little plateau area to the bottom, because I thought that would be create a large amount of interconnectivity. That was my big theme for this village. I wanted you to be able to go from the bottom of the mountains to the top of the mountain, to jump off into the river, to just get everywhere with ease. So I had to create bridges across these different areas and little walkways, so that way you could get from the back of the mountain to the front, using caves, tunnels, a bridge going across. And this bridge, I wanted to do this from the second I came up with the island idea. I'm like, whoa, it would be so cool to have a mountain bridge connecting one mountain to another, which was the original thought for those giant sand pillars, which we deleted earlier. But it didn't work out because of how the island shaped up. Now I'm going around continuing with these little pillars, which are holding up our walkways. These walkways are not very fancy, and the reason for that is that this village isn't meant to be the fanciest. Now, on the edge of this little cliff face here, I wanted to have a tavern or a bar, but I wasn't sure on how to do it. So I decided on a bit of a diagonal while still having it be kind of straight in the angles. And let me tell you now, diagonals are dumb. Alright, they're dumb, they're a waste. So if you're going to do a village like this, just don't do diagonals. Save yourself the pain. They really don't do much for the look of the village. And if you're going to do one, just do one max. I did like 4 of them, and it was a complete waste. They really don't do much for the village or the difference in the shape unless you're able to do them really easily, which I was not. So, you see me here building up this tower. I've been building up for a minute while I go into that rant about diagonals because there's more of them coming, and they were just the biggest pain in my everything. They were not easy to build and they were not fun to build. Normally building is fun. Diagonals are not fun. Don't build on diagonals. Anyways, now we're gonna get to some farms because I thought to myself, hey, these guys, they need food unless they're gonna starve. But you don't want to starve, because starving's not fun. So they built farms. Next up, lighting, because you gotta be able to get from point A to point B without getting killed by monsters or falling off a cliff because you don't know where you're going. So, lighting. Now, houses. Houses are great. You need more houses. Villages have houses. People live in houses. Big brain time, am I right? So I quickly got to work on some more houses at the bottom and the top of the mountain because I figured, hey, some people might be afraid of heights. Others might not. Maybe they can't afford to live on a mountain because they don't want to carry the materials up. Understandable. Then on this little house I saw that it was just lacking in some detail, so I threw a tower on it for the heck of it. Then I got to work on more connectivity. Ooh. From point A to point B, so you could go from the back of the mountain to the front again. Connectivity. I'm saying this a lot because it was the biggest theme I wanted for this. I wanted you to go from everywhere to everywhere. A little storage area at the top of the hill. Now part 6 was completely messed up. All I did was build this house, add in some little greenery around the river, and toss in some on this hill and across the little areas. I could not fix part 6 at all. It wouldn't start up and it would crash my Minecraft computer. Try to go around and fix it, try to do different tutorials, it just wouldn't work. So that's the only thing that I was completely incapable of adding. Next up, we have our pathway continuing around the mountain and another cave. So I didn't want to do a giant pathway going across, hence the breakups with the caves. But in the end, I thought the caves were a really cool thing, as it could show you going through the mountain, making an actual use of that space. So at the end, I thought it was a really cool idea. Next up, we have our actual path leading from the wooden pathways, which I wanted to have really bright, so I decided to use acacia wood. Now, acacia wood stands out big time as it's bright reddish orange. Now, continuing with this these wooden pathways being held up by these jungle log pillars and strip jungle log pillars. This is to create a sense of stability, and the shaving on the jungle logs is to create a sense of aging, as to tell a story. Then quickly, yet again, got to work on some more buildings. Buildings are great. They fill up space, and they look really cool at the end. So I added a bunch of towers in, as I thought, oh wow, towers, cool, right? You know, because you want to be able to see these views of this giant area. Why else would you live on a mountain? Then this giant house. This house was a bit of a mess up. I expected it to be like a bit of a farmhouse, it's just a giant storage area. That was not the case. I wound up coming up with this weird little wall thing. It was whack. Then moving on from that, we have our pond. Ponds are wonderful, and I put them at the top of every single one. Now lighting, back to lighting. Lighting is great, but it was a pain. I thought these little lanterns would be a good way to make up for it, and they'd look quite cool at the end. Now bridges, because connectivity, ooh. Going from point A to point B, using our same pathway design as I'm going around spamming the path everywhere, where it's just acacia, granite, some coarse dirt, just to connect everything. So you know where you're going, you're not wandering aimlessly around this giant island. Then, as you continue going through those, you're gonna go around, I went around the island, making these giant pathways of wood like I've been doing. Now by this point, I was just a little bit done with pathways and paths and everything relating to them. But I realized, let's just finish up this one, then we'll get to work on that mine I was thinking about earlier, right? So I quickly went around, spamming some railing in, just slapping in the railing onto the thing. Yet again, railing pain, it was the biggest pain. Then I'm like, oh man, treehouse, that would be the coolest addition to one of these mountains. So I quickly added in this treehouse. It is a fairly large one, and I added in a couple more details that aren't on this, because yet again, the footage got a little messed up, but I was able to salvage quite a bit of it. This treehouse is probably my favorite part of pretty much this entire build. I mean, the build itself is pretty cool, and the giant cave we're going to do is kind of cool, but that treehouse is amazing. It's one that I've always wanted. Who wouldn't? Then, we're going back to another tower. I just really wanted to add in a lot of towers, as I'm like, oh man, the view is wonderful. Then, I thought to myself, okay, I want to build a giant house. What's a better excuse than this cliffside? So that's exactly what I did. I built a giant house with loads of porches and 100 different steep areas, costing me at least an hour. But it was good fun, as I was kind of done with pathways and paths and everything relating to them. So this house was a bit of a break for me. Plus, in the end, if you're going to be living on this on this island trying to survive, I would suggest claiming this house is yours. It is the biggest one, nicest one, and it's genuinely just the best house out of all the best houses. Then, going from that, I quickly decided to add in more lighting, as I realized it was quite dark, just from all the different things that I'd added. Now I put in the connections to the railing to actually hold up the pathway, yet again using the same pattern, and now with another one of our ponds. Like I said, I added ponds in everywhere. Then, here on the cave, I put a little creation to hold up the actual wall, then some little plateau areas to actually hold materials. You see them on servers back in the day, or on the mining servers. I thought it would be a cool addition, so I added them in. Then here I added in a little back entrance to the mine, but we'll go back to that after we actually add in some lighting with our glowstone. Then going around, I added in slabs, stairs. Now, when I was building this cave, I realized I wanted one thing. A back entrance into it, and then I wanted to have the idea of the newer caves, which will be added in 1.17, where it's really big, really spacious, and there's loads of areas to explore. Now you're wondering, Peps, why are we going 100 miles per hour on the sand? And that's for one simple reason. Because this really wasn't the biggest part of the transformation. All I did was fill up a bunch of little areas, and it wasn't good fun to watch, as there wasn't a really big change. So I'm just speeding by in the sand. The only big parts were this little area right here, where I shape it up a bit, this, and then this little back area where I do a little bit more shaving, but really the true transformation doesn't happen until we get stone, which in this case was not yet, because here I had to do a bunch more shaving, which I hadn't done previously, but now we're getting into piecing in stone. Now this part is not really the quick transformation, because if it were, I would be going nice and slow. No, the real transformation happens after we go at the speed of the flash, spamming all of this stuff around, quickly covering up the bedrock. Which reminds me, if you don't mine straight down in this cave, and I know they say that's the #1 rule, and I break it all the time, but don't be like me, alright? You'll die. The bedrock has been turned to stone, because I didn't plan this world very well. No, the big transformation is here, where I quickly slapped in a pathway, creating a bit of a deviations, and adding in my glowstone. Now this was just to create more lighting, so that if you are in survival, you're able to go through. Now, as I was going around, spamming in these slabs and stairs to this entrance of the cave, I realized that it didn't look quite right, so I spent a couple of hours actually just reworking a lot of the entrance, trying to recreate that entrance from the previous one over here, with it again these little plateaus, using the same railings, so that we have something to hold the ores and furnaces and crafting tables in the future. Then some stairs, or relative stairs with just some slabs, going down to the bottom of the mine, as people have been going from the top and the bottom endlessly for forever now. Or, so that's what I wanted it to seem like. Now here, this is the big leagues, buddies. Alright, look, going around with these slimes and these stairs was the biggest pain. It was even more pain than the railings and everything I previously talked about. But all in all, it was good fun, because the end result is so cool, and honestly, I want them to add that in 1.17. And I know I've seen a couple snapshots, but at the time I wasn't sure what they would be adding, as this was recorded a while back. I wanted them to add in the different stairs and slabs versus having these giant caves with very little detail. I want them to do this, where they have little divots in the walls, and you've got your glowstone or whatever lighting they want to add in behind it, right? Because I thought that would be the coolest thing, if there's like little caverns for you to like jump into. I don't know. I thought it was a cool idea. Maybe they'll add it in. They probably won't. Mojang doesn't know what its players want, even when the players tell it what it wants. It's just how it works. It's the system. Anyways, moving on. We're continuing now. We're going to be building our little entrance, our exit and entrance over here, spamming around some ores. This is because if you're playing this in survival, I wanted you to be able to acquire everything. Then, on these little wooden platforms, holding the ores and furnaces. Now, if you dig underneath those little lapis and coal ores, you will find little surprises, whether that be diamond or emerald. You'll find out. It'll be fun. Now, this is because I've been putting off this one. As I said previously, I'm done with railings, and by this point I was done with caves, but I needed a way to connect it, so I added in the little baby ones. But I was kind of done with caves, I was done with paths, I was done with everything relating to anything connecting everything. So I just quickly spammed through, making these caves and creating entrances on them. Then I created a walkway all the way up to the top, and sticking to the idea of connectivity, I wanted to connect every single platform together up to a taller one, as I thought that would be a cool idea. Then going across, I created a back entrance there, which I didn't put on camera because it didn't really transfer well, but if you go through it, it's just a straight shot pretty much at the top of the mountain here. Then I went around spamming our railings and creating another cave. Then after doing that, I got to work on more housing, because housing is important. So, housing. Under this one, I wanted to create another farm, because I realized that I haven't really put too many in, and people still need to eat, apparently. I mean, for the number of houses that there are to farms, all of these people will be starving. It's terrible. These houses, these next two, are probably the best ones on the island as far as like looks go, but as far as design goes, not really. They don't have much space in them, and they're not very nice as far as user friendliness goes, but they do look quite cool with the different angles. And if you wanted to, you could connect those two up, making them quite nice. Now back to our ponds. These ponds are fantastic. They give you a nice view of the island, and they're great space fillers. Then our lighting on top of the trees, and our little area for the wandering trader. He is a staple of every build, and if you think otherwise, well, you're dead wrong. He's like the bread and butter of Minecraft now. Then continuing with our pathways, we had to go around creating lighting. Well, more me, less we, and to this I just wanted to be able to have the way for you to walk from point A of the island to point B, even if we're nighttime. Now if you put it in survival and you turn on monsters, you'll probably die, because I didn't light up all of it. I just lit up the pathway so you know where you're going. Then creating more housing on the edges of this walkway. This is because I had quite a bit of free space here, and I still didn't have many houses going across this thing. Now this is the only house to feature a basement. This is because basements are not something that I thought would be a big deal in this village, but I figured I'd add one anyways. Then another farm. Like I said, everyone here would be starving, period. There's nowhere near enough farms to support the amount of housing that's going into this, but that's beside the point, because now we have a tower house, and tower houses are cool, though the tower itself is okay. Then continuing with that idea of connectivity, I connected the path from the mountain, going around the back of it all the way back to the front, into that little center rock which I started earlier. Then going around the mountains to cover up some of the stone, I added in quite a bit of grass. Continuing with the mountains, we have me going around just spamming this greenery in to cover up all the stone. Now diagonal houses, oof, diagonal houses, it was such a pain to build this one in specific, because the dimensions never quite worked with copy and paste, so sections that are already built have to rebuild. Plus, just the way it is, it takes quite a bit more effort to build diagonal houses, and nothing quite lines up. It does look quite cool, but the roofs are always a pain, so I would suggest just building normal houses if you're trying to create a huge project like this one. Just, word to the wise, diagonal houses are dumb and they really don't do much, so just don't, alright? Then, creating these windows for the house, I wanted them to be able to look through, but nothing too special. Then onto another house, because I needed more things to patch up all of this blank space over here. This house is not the biggest, nor is it the nicest, but I do like the way that it stole from quite a few of my previous tutorials, so feel free to check those out. Then back to the farms, because yet again, starving villagers, not good. Right? No. We will fix that problem with bigger farms. It's big brain time. So connecting the farm up to all of that land with our nice pathways like such, connecting the back and the front. Now we have our carrot farm, another potato farm, and a beetroot farm. What's anyone going to do with beetroots? I don't know, but they have them. And then those hay bales, which I thought would be kind of cool, as they were actually added into the farming update way back when. Then continuing with our general idea of lighting, so that you don't die when you walk in your pathway. Honestly, just learn to not die. At rate. So, continuing with our lighting, we will just about get to it. So, this is pretty much it. Let's show you the big reveal. Ooh, fancy. Alright, end of the video. Quick few things. A, like and subscribe. See you next week, if not this week. And I got 3rd place, so haha. See ya.